right. Well, hi guys. Remember how I promised you that if you put some questions together about probation, that we would get those answered? I'm not going to lie, I forgot I said that. So today I am answering those questions. So I'm here with Jeff Breach. Say hi, Jeff.
Hello.
Jeff is, first of all, my husband, but second, he is the director of the Canyon County Misdemeanor Probation Department and has served in that capacity for 10 years and then has worked in the criminal justice field about 20 years. He's also worked as worked for the sheriff's department and then worked in felony probation and parole. And so we're just going to kind of informally go through some of these questions you guys had. If you do have any follow-up questions, go ahead and post those as well, and I can follow up with you on those. So Jeff, if you want to tell us maybe in your department on average about how many individuals does a probation officer have on their caseload?
They have about 150 right now.
Okay, so pretty big. I'm not sure what you guys thought the answer on that might be. And that really would vary from department to department. I know when I worked in juvenile probation, so for those of you guys, I think I had told most of you that I worked in juvenile corrections for about 12 years. Most of the time my caseload was closer to the 30 to 40 mark, and I supervised like an intensive kind of supervision, intensive supervision where we saw them multiple times a week. Okay, Jeff, one student wanted to know if a probation officer has to deal with people that are violent.
Yeah, you get people from all walks of life. I mean, from young to elderly, from mentally ill to gang offenders. There really is all walks of life on probation.
And how would officers protect themselves, or what type of training do they have to help in situations like that?
Well, I think the best training that you really have is your communication skills, your ability to talk with people. And I think that's the best tool you have, whether you're a probation officer or a police officer. But probation officers also do have defensive tactics training as well.
Good. A couple of students were wondering about the most rewarding part about this type of career and then also the most challenging part about working in probation.
Well, I think probation officers see a lot of change in people. I mean, they see people turn their lives around, and that's rewarding. I think one of the more challenging things is I think people, when you work in probation, you're very much in a state of continual confrontation with people, and it's not very often that people are happy with what you've done. Whether it's somebody that thinks you've been too hard or somebody that thinks you're too soft, or there's a variety of things, and you're really tasked with getting people to do things they don't want to do.
Good. And what's kind of the most rewarding?
I think it's seeing the change in people.
Seeing the change in people. I would agree. I think when I was a probation officer, one thing I did learn kind of was to define success differently, though. What I might consider success for myself might be different than what someone else might. And so I think we have to be careful bringing kind of our own implicit biases and expectations to the job. One student was wondering, what are some of the ways that you felt like you had the most success maybe in connecting with people, or
well, I think that if you're going to get any degree of success with somebody, you have to build a certain degree of a working relationship and rapport. And it's difficult to really get anything out of somebody if you don't have a working rapport. So I think that's the very first thing that as a probation officer you have to do is you have to build some relationship, and you have to build some trust.
That's good. For your department, what are the hours and conditions? What does kind of a day look like for a probation officer?
Well, I mean, most of the probation officers work like a 4-week work day. So they have required morning hours, they have required evening hours. Sometimes there's some weekend things, and sometimes there's some late night stuff. But I think people, it's more close to 10-hour shifts, and it's not super late, but there is evening work that you have to do.
How is that different maybe from when you worked in felony probation and parole?
Well, I think like in felony probation and parole, there was more later hours that we did. But I think the reality of any probation officer job is it's not an 8 to 5 kind of thing. If what you really want is an 8 to 5 kind of job, a probation officer's work isn't for you. because even though you have some flexibility in your schedule, it's not flexible for your benefit. It's flexible for the benefit of the people you're supervising.
That's a great point. And I would echo that when I worked in juvenile probation, I think our schedules mirrored a little bit closer to the 8 to 5, but there was some expectation of working in the evenings. And I don't remember working weekends very often. It was a rare case. But I agree there is flexibility in the job, but it's for the benefit of the individuals that you're working with. Okay, so one question was, did either of you work with juveniles? If so, how did it compare with adults? And so my whole career, I worked with juveniles, and Jeff's whole career, he worked with adults. And we sometimes joke, and I say, I would never want to work with adults because I feel like with juveniles you have a chance to change. And he would say, I never want to work with juveniles because then you have to work with their parents. But those are some big differences. So working with juveniles has, I think, different types of challenges than working with the adult population. Part of that is you really are forced to work with the whole family because that's where the kid is living, the parents are involved, and sometimes that can be really beneficial, having the parents buy in. And then sometimes there are families that are pretty criminal, and so it's the parents maybe aren't supportive of what you do as a probation officer or the changes that you're wanting the kid to make. I would say those are some of the biggest differences or challenges that I saw. Jeff, can you think of any other differences maybe?
Well, I think that, the big thing is like in working with adults is you really are working more with just one person. It's not really, you may want to take a family approach, but it's not really the case because that one individual is the only person that you have any kind of authority or buy-in from.
Yeah, and with juveniles, again, it's a little bit different. Courts, the judge can actually have some limited jurisdiction over parents in terms of telling them things that they need to do, maybe in terms of like family counseling or parenting classes. I think probably the very most angry I've ever had a parent at me, the most angry parent that I've ever dealt with was because the judge had ordered her to take drug tests, even though it was her daughter that was on probation, and she came back with a dirty UA and had to go to jail. And so, she was furious, but again, it was not because she was on probation, her daughter was. So, yeah, definite differences there. Okay, Jeff, how do you assign cases to probation officers?
Well, it's different from department to department, but in our department, it's assigned by judge. So each probation officer has a judge they're assigned to, and they basically get all the cases that come from that judge. And the reason we do it that way is for court purposes, because there's so much court each week. But that way we only have one probation officer in each given courtroom throughout the week, and it frees them up more. So that's why we assign it by judge.
That makes a lot of sense. Other ways that I've seen cases assigned sometimes are based on the type of caseload, and so different probation officers will have different types of caseloads. So for instance, when I was a PO in Canyon County, I dealt with primarily kids who had been committed to the state and also who were gang affiliated, and so that was the type of caseload that I had. Other probation officers had cases that were sex offender cases, some had mental health cases, and so I've seen caseloads distributed that way. I've also seen caseloads distributed geographically, and so probation officers might be assigned to like a certain part of the city. A student asked if you have the option to choose what type of cases you might deal with as a probation officer.
Not in this department, you don't. In this department, you're expected to deal with every type of case that your judge may sentence.
Okay, thank you. And then I think what this question is about, do you use your personal vehicle in the field?
Not in this department, you don't. You use a county vehicle.
And I think that probably also is something that varies from department to department. Okay, what is the best way to get your foot in the door to become a probation officer?
Well, I think it's probably by doing an internship.
Internships.
Getting some related experience. I think that's a good way to kind of add something to your degree, because there's a lot of people out there with degrees now.
Mm-hmm. Good, and just kind of as a side note, we will have our internship fair coming up later in October. if anyone's interested in that. But I would concur with what Jeff says. Not only does the internship give you the opportunity to kind of get a taste for the job and the skills that you need, but it also helps you make connections to those individuals who will be making hiring decisions. Jeff, what are some characteristics that you look for when hiring probation officers?
I look for good communication skills. I look for somebody that has a calm demeanor. I look for maturity. I think those are really valuable in dealing with volatile people. I think you want somebody that's kind of level-headed and can kind of, keep their head when things aren't going really well with an interaction with somebody. And I think part of that's where maturity comes in as well.
Yeah. One thing I've heard Jeff say and other professionals in the criminal justice field is, he doesn't expect you to come knowing how to be a probation officer. Those are things that can be taught, but some of these other characteristics are really important things for an individual to bring to the job. So this student asked about prerequisites are as strenuous as those to become a police officer. So I'm guessing maybe kind of the physical fitness requirements. Are there physical fitness requirements?
It depends on the department. I mean, there's certain departments that they have the same kind of physical fitness test as the police department does. It really just depends by department. That's hard to say across the board.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the post-certification required for probation?
Well, it's an academy that you have to go through. Currently for misdemeanor, it's like a 3.5-week academy. You have to get it done within a year of hire. You have to complete an FTO program that's approved by Post, as well as your probationary period with your department. And Post is a combination of some physical training like self-defense, and then a bunch of cognitive things, whether it's learning how to do risk assessments or motivational interviewing. There's a lot that goes into it.
Great. And just for any of you guys interested in probation as a career, whether you're thinking misdemeanor probation, juvenile probation, or felony probation, all of those require post-certification. So that is something that you would have to go through. And again, Post is the type of academy that law enforcement officers go through. Probation is its own academy, though, so it'll be different than what officers would go through. And I don't think, are any of those residential academies anymore?
No.
Okay, so you would live at, especially being in this area, live at home and then go into Meridian for those classes every day, which is probably better than living there. Jeff's done a couple stints at Post. It's like a scout camp or something, right? Okay, can you talk a little bit about salary ranges in probation, or at least for your department, about what it starts at?
In this department, it starts at probably just under $37,000 a year. And then there's like a pay scale that we go through, and the county's goal is to move you along to midline so that you're at midline by 5 years in position, and then it continually grows after that to try to get you to the top of the salary in terms of if you were staying under like a 20-25 year plan.
Final question, and this is a great question. Somebody did their reading. It says, we learned in class that a greater proportion of correctional growth has occurred in probation and parole. So I would assume that probation officers are sometimes stretched too thin. Would you say that that's correct?
Yeah, I think that's the correct assumption.
And then how do you combat the stress that's associated with being a probation officer?
Well, I think that just comes down to the individual. It comes down to, do they take things personally? Do they not? I mean, learning how to not take things personally is something that, you've got to learn to do, whether you're in probation or policing. And then just determining, how you take care of yourself, whether it's through exercise or your recreation, what your family life looks like. I think how you take care of yourself, your mental health is different from person to person. But yeah, that's one of those things that you have to figure out how you're going to do what's going to work for you to keep you going.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate your time. Any kind of final advice or anything else you could tell students interested in this career?
Well, it can be a very rewarding career. It can also be a very challenging career. It's a career that I've seen some people have some very long careers in, and but in others I've seen people burn out really quick. I mean, it's not a career for everybody.